Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I wanted to check in with some of our union brethren to find out what's going on, COVID-19 and sick days and a bunch of other issues. And so I reached out to Ken Neuman. Ken is very involved in union, the union sector. Ken, tell me, what is it you're doing and how long you've been with the Steelworkers?
Well, I've been with the Steelworkers on staff since 1977. I've been elected since 1989, and I came from Vancouver to Toronto in 2004 as the National Director for Canada. So that's my history. My background is I worked in the mines, worked in the steel mills, so I've had some hands-on experience in regards to some of the work that our members get to do every single day.
Excellent. And what are the big issues that union members are facing right now with COVID-19?
Well, obviously it's the safety and health. I mean, I think one of the things, Brian, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning to go to work to get injured or sick or get killed, and yet in this country we kill 1,000 people a year just by that. The fact is that health.
Sorry, hold on. You're saying we kill 1,000 people a year?
Yes.
Through what?
Just going to work, industrial accidents.
Really?
Workplace accidents. The statistics have been quite consistent over the years that we've been killing over 1,000 people a year just by going to work and performing whatever duties. And that's why our union has been in the forefront, Brian, of continuing to fight. For example, the Westray Law. I think you're probably familiar with that.
Yep.
The big mine explosion. It was our union that brought forth the Westray Bill, which makes it now criminal negligence if the company's found guilty that they, we say you kill a worker, you go to jail. I mean, if there's negligence involved. So to me, safety and health is one of the big issues. And I think some of that's been exposed during the COVID-19 in regards to PPEs, in regards to the right to refuse. It's a big issue.
Yep.
And I think that it serves right across the spectrum. If you're working in a nursing home, or if you're working in a steel mill or an underground mine, that's a big issue.
So tell me about the sick day issue. The NDP, Jagmeet Singh has recommended a universal sick day policy or something, and you've got an opinion on it. Tell me about that.
Well, look, it's long overdue, Brian. The fact of the matter is that you got workers that I can't think of a more valuable asset to an employer than its employees. And the fact is, one of the things that the COVID-19 has exposed in regards to the shortcomings of what we have in our society. And one of them is in regards to people are forced to basically go to work, even though they're not feeling well, because they can't afford to stay home to fend for their families. So I think it's the right thing to do. Jagmeet put that forth to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is now committed. They're going to take that to the rest of the provinces, and it's long overdue. We had a taste of that in the previous provincial government. They brought in, I think it was 7 or 8 personal days, but that got put off to the side. But clearly is that why a worker, if you look at the COVID-19, is that the spread in many of those cases in the nursing homes and the front lines is because people were going to work, they were infected, and so it's the right thing to do. As I said, I don't think there's any boss or any CEO that gets his pay docked if he's not feeling well or if he's sick or he's staying at home. So in this particular case, and as a trade union, we negotiate in our collective agreements on a regular basis. Now, we represent a very broad section of workers. We represent university, we represent nursing homes, we represent taxis, you name it. So it varies in regards to what kind of sick pay a lot of these companies have that we negotiate with. But in this particular case, what Jagmeet and the Prime Minister are attempting to do is guarantee a minimum of 10 days. That is the right thing to do because it's mostly the vulnerable, the precarious workers. These are the people that are on the front lines. And this has all been exposed since the COVID-19.
Now, I was surprised, you mentioned that you represent a lot of other people. I was surprised when I looked at the stats. Only 10% of your members, you're the national director of the Steelworkers Union, and only 10% of your people work in steel or metal fabricating. Is that not the case? And so you represent a lot of healthcare workers and a lot of people in a lot of other sectors.
Well, Brian, at one time we probably had 100,000 members in the steel industry. And if you look at what's happened since the 1980s, today we represent just a little over 20,000 in steel. We represent mining. You must remember, though, that our union is fairly broad-based through many mergers. We represent telecommunication workers, hospital workers, universities, mining, the forestry workers, they merge with us. So we are very diversified. Our membership base is very broad. one of our largest locals is the University of Toronto.
Oh, really?
That's right. So we just don't represent people in manufacturing. We represent a very broad base. We have roughly about 3,000 members in the healthcare sector, Brian. And these are the frontline workers that have really been struggling with this COVID-19 and the sad reality of what this has exposed in regards to PPEs, that people going to work to care for our loved ones is the right word to say, that people have put their parents in those homes. And to witness what we witnessed is a black mark on Canada, in my view, because we've not been able to look after. If we don't have the ability to even manufacture our own safety equipment on the PPEs to give it to the frontline workers that are there to look after our loved ones, it's a sad day in our society.
So I understand, as you mentioned, that you represent some of the workers in long-term care, and clearly has been one of the nexuses of the infection and of the deaths. What went wrong? We just didn't have PPE warehoused, or we didn't order it quick enough, or we didn't supply enough of it, or we got untrained workers, or what's the problem?
The problem is, first of all, the government was ill prepared. The fact is that there's been continuously cutbacks in regards to the healthcare budgets. They weren't prepared for this pandemic. And the fact is that you got the nursing homes in particular, you got the profit for care, which is another dilemma. We've seen situations where people just weren't equipped. Some cases, workers had to wear garbage bags to get protective equipment, and that's where the spread started. If you look at, I think the figure is, Brian, close to 80% of the deaths are related to nursing home facilities. Look what happened in Quebec. Just look in our backyard. You have to bring the army in, and you listen to those witness statements, it brings tears to your eyes. And one of the things I say is this: if you now look at the generation that's coming up, it's the baby boomer generation. These are the people that are getting to that age now where children have to make a decision, where some of their parents may have to go to that next phase, and that is the personal home care, which is also workers that are moving from one place to the other, or you've got the nursing homes. And if you witnessed what we've just seen in the last several months, I mean, that's kind of like sending your parents to a slaughterhouse. I mean, that's...
Oh, please don't say it's a slaughterhouse.
Well, but the fact is, if you look at how you're putting, what risk you're putting these people in, I mean, if you look at the amount of deaths, Brian, I mean, it's been horrendous of how we've treated these people. And it's all because we've not, as a society, been able to look after. What the healthcare system has to change, in particular the nursing homes. You got to make that part of the Health Act, and that's, I think, where it's gone wrong.
Oh God, I can't believe you used that language of slaughterhouse. Now I have heard people call it warehousing.
Okay, well, I apologize if you went one step too further, but the fact is that
that's bad enough.
If you're looking at somebody, if you look at the amount of deaths, 80%, I don't know what you call it.
No, you're right. It is a black market. There's no question. Now, I had a couple of other representatives of unions that represent some of the people in long-term care, and I was shocked to find out that there was a major investigation and study, judicial commission study after SARS, and one of the members said, we just didn't even listen to the recommendations made after SARS.
Well, I don't have any knowledge to that, but the fact is that that's why when they make those recommendations, and I think in this particular case, there has to be a public inquiry. I think that one of the things that I think you'll see the momentum moving now, that if what we've witnessed across the country, this is from Quebec to British Columbia, that the amount of deaths and the amount of shortages, I think that you'll see a public inquiry. And I think, as I said a moment ago, that this should be going into the Canadian Health Act, is that you can't have that kind of care for profit. I think that that's been one of the big significant problems that we've had, the way they've treated the situation. So here's an opportunity for the governments to step up and make it part of the Health Act.
One of the things that has been mentioned is that, and not just in long-term care, but in hospitals and other places, that there's this big move to part-time contract, and therefore people are moving around to different facilities, and they don't have the long-term the long-term association with one institution, and so therefore their wages are cut. They're carrying the virus from one place to another place. They're doing more traveling. What's happening? It's almost like this movement to a gig economy and fragmentation of long-term careers and jobs, isn't it?
Well, if you look at what's happened in British Columbia, first of all, it's about the deregulation. They basically, the government back there years ago chopped up the collective agreement, and the fact is that in some cases workers have to go have more than one job to make a living. So that's where in British Columbia it was found that some of these folks that were working in a nursing home in North Vancouver were infected, and they'd go from one nursing home to another. And once the BC government found out, they very quickly put a stop to that. You can't work more than at one home. It's the same as the personal care workers that, people that are going to the homes. These people are going to someone's house for 2 hours. And if they're not properly protected and if they're carrying the virus, they'll just spread it from one to the other. So those are things that it's precarious workers, and those are the people that we need to defend for. And that's why these personal sick days is important. If you're sick, you shouldn't be going to work. And that's the requirement that's needs to get done, Brian.
Let me go back to, your roots, steel, manufacturing. A lot of people think that, global supply chains are going to be completely severed, and if not completely severed, certainly negatively impacted by COVID-19. You've got the case of Donald Trump ordering 3M to not ship masks across the border. You've got a lot of people that I think we should be bringing back some manufacturing to Canada and less reliant on low-cost suppliers in China and Vietnam, particularly of critical pieces of equipment like PPE and respirators, ventilators, hospital equipment, etc. Do you think that we're going to have a rebirth of manufacturing in Canada?
Yeah, I do. I truly do. I think that what this pandemic has done, sadly, besides all of the terrible losses of death and the shortcomings of what we've been able to see, I think people are now going to be looking much more closer at the fact is that why can't we do the manufacturing that we've done? If you look at since 1950, the percentage of the GDP that we used to manufacture was much higher than it is today. If you look at more recently, for example, steel and aluminum, we had the tariffs imposed. It was our union that fought to get those removed. To basically, if you don't have a strong steel industry or aluminum industry, I truly believe that you're going to see some of that industry coming back here. There's no reason why we can't build a lot of those things that are being offshored and you don't have that security. So I think that that's something that governments and I think employers are starting to look at, is that we should be able to produce and build that just in our backyard. One of the things that's strange, Brian, is that why is it, for example, our steel industry, and I'm sure you know the Hamilton area as well as anybody, is that why are we still building bridges with Chinese steel, both in BC and both in Montreal? And that's another issue in regards to the foreign materials that are coming and being dumped into the detriment of our members. And that's the thing that we struggle with every day as well.
What do you think the future of the union sector is?
Well, look at the union sector is the one that gives you the middle class. It's the fact is that we are out there, fighting for the people that need to be represented. We try to look at the fact of having a social and just society. We're the ones that continue to fight for health and safety. We expect people to have a decent living, have a decent wage. And one of the big problems we have with the precarious worker, Brian, is that it's difficult. The unionization is very difficult because of the laws. The laws are against the precarious workers to join a union. First of all, we're the ones that continue to fight for a minimum wage. So I see growth. I see fact that what we've just seen here, I actually see that the opportunities for organizing are going to continue to grow because we've been at the forefront fighting on the right matters in regards to health and safety and manufacturing and bringing some of these goods back into our country and stand up for what we think is right for society.
Well, Ken Neuman, National Director of the Steelworkers Union, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Do you have a final message to Canadians? Well,
final message to Canadians is stay safe, and the important part is that we need to do the right thing, and I'm more concerned about our healthcare system and what we need to do to protect the elderly or loved ones. These are the people that have built this great country. And if they're the ones that are going to be needing these homes into the future, we have to fix that because that truly is a black mark on Canadian society.
I couldn't agree more. Ken, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Good night.